Okay, so welcome to our next video in basic cooking and making a meal through the Brain Injury Association of Maryland. So hopefully you've reviewed a few of our previous videos of kitchen safety and reading a recipe. Viewing the video of making a sandwich isn't required before this one, but it's a helpful starting point if you're just sort of learning how to cook and make food for yourself here. So today's video, we're going to go through the steps of making eggs and toast. So first, I'm going to show a video demonstrating making eggs and toast for you here. And we're going to play that video, and so you can watch that through before we go through the steps of reading the recipe and having you make the eggs and toast yourself. And so I would recommend viewing this video first, and then or viewing the demonstration first. Then you can use this video to actually walk you through the steps of making eggs and toast together. So you can either watch this whole video from start to finish and then try making the eggs and toast yourself, but you can also use this as a step-by-step guide for making the recipe. So we are going to go ahead and watch the demonstration here.
Hello, and welcome to the demonstration today of making scrambled eggs and toast. So we're going to walk through the steps of the recipe here, and I'm going to show you how you can make scrambled eggs following the recipe instructions that go along with this video. So the first thing that we need to do is to check to make sure that we have all of our ingredients and equipment. For scrambled eggs, it's pretty easy. So we have our eggs here, we have our bread to make our toast here, and then I'm going to be using a pan spray for the pan today. You could also use butter in your pan if you didn't have pan spray. And then I have a little bit of salt and pepper in front of me as well for seasoning. And then for our equipment, I have our saucepan here that we're going to use, or our skillet pan, excuse me. We have a spoon and a fork so that we can whisk up our eggs. We have our small bowl to put the eggs into to mix them up. And then to the side here, I also have a toaster oven. If you don't have a toaster oven and you have a regular toaster, that works well for this recipe as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put our toast in the toaster and get that toasting while we are cooking our eggs. So I'm going to make 2 slices of toast for this breakfast this morning. And when I put them in the toaster, I'm going to make sure that it's on the toast setting, and then I'm going to set it to about a 3 because I want it to be about a medium toast here. So we're going to hear that toasting in the background while we're cooking here. Next, we're going to crack our eggs. I'm making breakfast for 2 people this morning, so I'm going to make 5 eggs. If you were making breakfast just for 1 person, you would probably want to make 2 to 3 eggs depending on how hungry you were or how much you like to eat for breakfast. So I'm going to crack my 5 eggs into the bowl here. And you'll notice that I'm using the edge of the bowl to crack the eggs, which is nice because if there's a little bit that spills out when I crack them, it spills into the bowl and not on my counter. So my hands are full, so I'm going to throw these 3 eggshells away. And now I'm going to crack my other 2 eggs. Okay, I'm going to throw these eggshells away. And now that I'm done touching the eggs, I'm going to actually wash my hands because we don't want raw eggs on our hands while we're touching or working with other things. Okay, so now before I stir up the eggs, I'm going to get my pan hot to be able to cook the eggs in. So I'm turning the stove top on to medium heat, so it would be maybe a 4, a 5, or a 6 on your stove. And I'm going to spray my spray into the pan. And I don't need a lot, I just need enough to cover, I'll show you here, to cover the bottom of the pan and a little bit of the sides. And I don't know if you noticed on here, but when I turned the stove top on, it turned sort of a bright red to tell me that it was getting hot. So you can see that here. So that's a good way for me to be able to see that the stove is hot. Now I'll put my pan on and I'm going to hold my hand over it just to see if it's feeling warm or not. And I'll test it again before I put the eggs in. So next I'm going to use this fork here. You can also use a whisk if you have one. Not everyone has a whisk at home, so a fork works just fine. And I'm actually going to whisk up the eggs. So I'm going to stir really fast with my fork, and I'm going to do that so that the eggs get all mixed together, and they're going to just sort of be a bright yellow color. Ding. So our toast is done, and I'm just going to leave it in the toaster. It'll stay warm there until our eggs are finished cooking. If you toasted too quickly, if like you didn't get enough toast on your bread, then you could certainly put it in for a little bit longer time too. We have plenty of time. So you can see here, the bowl of eggs is now all mixed together, so they're all sort of that yellowy color in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test to see if my pan is hot. And it feels warm. I can, just holding my hand over it, I can feel the heat. So I'm going to go ahead and add my eggs to the pan. If you're using butter, you could also tell because the butter would be melted at the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to use my spoon here. I scraped out my bowl. I'll keep my fork in there so my dirty dishes are off to the side. And now this is the hard part with scrambled eggs, is that actually we don't need to start mixing it right away. We want to give it a minute just to sort of cook before we start mixing it up, and that's going to help it kind of come together and make fluffier eggs. Some people do stir the whole time. That's sort of if you like smaller scrambled eggs or maybe not quite as fluffy, but we're going to be patient. We'll wait a moment here and then we'll mix our eggs in a moment when they're ready. Okay, so our eggs are starting to cook a little bit here, and I can tell when I stirred it, right, I can start to see some of it pull away from the edges, some of these little cooked pieces here. So now, because it's starting to cook more and starting to get hard, I'm going to stir it in the pan. I want to make sure that it's not sticking to the edges of the pan, right? We want to make sure that it gets cooked all the way through, but we don't want anything burnt or stuck to it. And I'm just going to start one side of the pan and kind of move my spoon up and down. And then maybe I'll go the other direction. There's not a real exact way to do it here when you're just kind of making eggs for yourself at home. The big thing is that you just want to make sure that you're scraping the bottom of the pan, kind of moving everything around and your edges of your pan too. You can see it's a little bit hot. I'm sure in the video you can see there's a little bit of steam coming up as the eggs cook. So it's a good sign also to know that they're cooking. But they're starting, I can see some cooked pieces in there. They're a little bit lighter, a little bit more solid. And I'm just going to keep stirring these in the pan here until they're pretty much cooked through. You don't have to stir it 100% the entire time. You can kind of take a minute, let it settle, let it cook, but you don't want to do that for too long because then again it'll start to sort of cook and stick to your pan here. So you can see now as I'm scraping the bottom of it, it's not totally liquid. It doesn't immediately come and fill the gaps where I've cooked or I've moved the spoon, and that's showing you that it's definitely cooking along here. And it won't take quite as long. So I made 5 eggs today because I'm making enough for 2 people. If you're making 2 eggs for 1 person, this will happen faster. But the more liquid that's in your pan, right, the longer it's going to take it for it to cook. Okay, so we're getting closer here. You can start to see I've got what looks a lot more like scrambled eggs and a lot less like liquid. And at this point, everything's pretty much cooked. You're basically just going to cook until it's at the texture that you like. So some people like their eggs a little bit softer, maybe a little bit runnier. If you like yours more cooked through, right, just keep on cooking until everything looks cooked and done. And they're going to be just sort of a nice bright yellow color. All right, so my eggs are looking pretty good, pretty close to done here. So I'm going to turn my burner off. And they're still cooking because they're sitting on the burner, so the burner's still hot. So they're getting a little bit of heat to them. And now I'm going to go ahead and take them off the burner and set them to the side, because if they sit on that burner, they're going to keep cooking. I'm going to get out my toast that's been staying nice and warm in the toaster. And I'm going to add a little bit of butter to my toast today. Okay. And then I'm going to serve my eggs on the plate here. And I like to eat my eggs on top of my toast, but you could serve it on the side however you like to eat it. That's the nice part about eggs, is they're really versatile. You can do a lot of different things with it. So thank you for watching this video today. I hope you learned a little bit more about scrambled eggs and toast and how to be able to make that. And we're going to walk through the steps of the recipe and getting yourself ready for it in the next little bit of the video here.
Okay, so now that we've watched the video, we are going to go through the steps where you can make the scrambled eggs and toast yourself. So what I have here is the goal plan do review sheet, which should look very familiar if you've watched any of the other videos that we've produced here. This is the simplified version, and this is the more detailed version. So if you don't have one out yet, pause the video here and grab this sheet, because we're going to use it to go along in making our recipe today. So the first thing that we're going to fill out is the goal component of the worksheet. So a few examples of the goals that you have for yourself today might be to make yourself a meal, to work in the kitchen safely, to learn how to use the stove. Whatever the goal is for you, I'll have you take a moment and pause and write that down on your goal plan do review sheet. Next, we're going to think about the steps to accomplish this goal. So one thing you could do is you can pause the video here and write down all of the steps after watching the video demonstration of making eggs and toast that you remember, and this will help you summarize the steps and get familiar with the recipe. We can also think about the video of reading a recipe and the steps that it takes to get ready, and that's what we're going to go through here. So first, we want to get out the recipe for making eggs and toast. We're going to look at or figure out the time we need to make the recipe. We're going to look at the ingredients list. We're going to check to see if we have all of the ingredients, identify the equipment we need, read each step of the recipe and make notes as we're reading it, gather all of the equipment and ingredients needed, and follow the steps of the recipe. So I would suggest pausing here and writing this down on your goal plan do review sheet, as well as if you would like to summarize the steps from the recipe itself. Next, we're going to think about the things that we need to be able to make this recipe. So we definitely need our recipe, we need our cooking equipment, and we need our ingredients. And we're going to go through looking at those specifically on the recipe in the next couple of steps here. Next, I would like you, before we get started, to rate how well you think you're going to do on this task here. You know, if this is a new task for yourself or you're learning, you might rate yourself a little lower. Maybe you're more familiar, more comfortable, rate yourself a little bit higher on your prediction on your goal plan do review sheet. So take a moment there, pause, and fill out that portion of the sheet. So next, we're going to walk through the steps that we learned in reading a recipe to follow the recipe to make eggs and toast. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have enough time to make the recipe. This recipe requires us to spend 5 minutes preparing, about 3 to 5 minutes cooking, so a total time of 10 minutes to make our eggs and toast. So we need at least 10 minutes available. Our ingredients are at the top here. So if we're making it just for one person, we need 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon of butter or some cooking spray, salt and pepper if we desire, and 1 to 2 slices of bread. And then the equipment we need is a small bowl, a fork or a whisk, a small pan or a skillet, a microwave safe bowl, a large spoon or a rubber spatula, or a toaster. We don't actually need the microwave safe bowl. That's a mistake there. Whoops. So we'll pause here, take a minute, review, and make sure that you have enough time and the ingredients and equipment needed to make the recipe. Next, we're going to read through the steps of the recipe. So this recipe, a little more complicated than the last one, has two different things that we're going to be working on at the same time, right? So read through the recipe, make any notes if you need to, and then after you read through that, summarize and the steps out loud for yourself, or you can write them down on your goal plan do review sheet just to make sure you know what it is that you need to do. So an example might be, I would summarize it by saying, you know, I'm going to toast the bread in the toaster, and then I'm going to cook my eggs in the pan, and I'm going to mix them up in the small bowl, get my pan hot, add them to the pan, stir them up, and serve them when they're done. That's a very quick summary, right? But it just helps me organize and know the steps I need to take to finish this recipe. So pause here, take a moment for yourself to do those steps. Next, you're going to need to gather your equipment and ingredients. So when you checked for them, if you pulled them out already, you might already have them ready to go. If not, go ahead and get them out now. And once you do have them all out, organize your workspace to make sure that it's easy for you to be able to work, that you can get everything done that you need to get done, that your toaster's plugged in, that you have space cleared off to crack the eggs and stir them in, all of those steps, get your space ready. So take a moment to pause here and get your workspace ready. All right, so next is the exciting part where you're actually going to follow the steps of the recipe to cook your eggs and toast. If you're following along with the video here, go ahead and pause the video. You can use the steps and instructions that are up on the screen here, or you can use your printed recipe, whatever is easier for you. But go ahead, pause the video, and we'll see you once your eggs and toast are cooked. All right, so hopefully you're rejoining now because you've had some time to actually cook your eggs and toast. We're going to finish up our goal plan do review sheet. And you're just going to kind of reflect on how the task went, how it went for you to make the eggs and toast. So you're going to think about what problems did you find, what solutions. Pause the video here, take a moment, reflect, and write those things down. And then next, give yourself a review of how you did from 1 to 10, what worked well, what didn't work, and what are you going to try differently next time, if anything. You know, maybe you need to do a little more prep ahead of time, but maybe it went really well and you're going to just use the steps that you did today of getting yourself prepared and organized before you cook. So thank you for joining us here. I hope you enjoyed the process of making eggs and toast. It's one of my favorite breakfasts, or lunch even sometimes too, and really learned a lot and are feeling more comfortable with using the stovetop for cooking today. And as you're ready to try a few more recipes, we'll see you in the next videos.